Out of like the 10 recommendations that it gave, I would say probably 50% were actionable, 50% were high level.
At the end of the day, if you don't know who you're trying to sell to and why they would want to buy your product, all of this other stuff really doesn't matter too much.
Business is all people. Business is team. Nice, I say, building business is a team sport.
Real talk backed up with real action. This is GTM News Desk.
I'm Nick Bennett.
And I'm Mark Hillens.
Let's see what's trending.
Welcome to another episode of GTM News Desk. My name is Mark Hillens, joined by Nick Bennett today. Nick, what's going on, my friend?
Just living the life. It's a beautiful day outside. Can't complain.
Very good. We have three very exciting and interesting segments for you today on the news desk. We have our two segments and stories of the day to start with, and then we'll get into a great conversation with Manoj, the CEO of SalesIntel. It's a not miss conversation around your ideal customer profile and what CEOs really think about go-to-market strategy and creating and identifying the right customers to sell your product to. To kick it off with the headline story, Nick, Nike has really effed up. Big time. You a big Nike guy?
I actually am. I have a lot of Nike shoes, although I've been buying less and less, and I'm more into like Allbirds right now, just because of how comfortable they are. But like my baseball cleats, they're Nike. Like everything that I have from a sports perspective is Nike.
Well, interesting. I definitely have a lot of Nike stuff as well. I never buy new shoes though. I buy one pair of new shoes a year. That's a fun fact about me. I could give two shits less about a shoe, but I know some people are obsessed with shoes. So Nike though, they make a lot of stuff. They don't make just shoes. Of course, that's how they got into all this. And there's a great book and there's a great movie about Nike. Check those two things out if you haven't yet. Nike though, a few years ago, when they brought a new CMO in and a few new presidents to their business, Nick, made a massive decision. They said, look, our strategy in the past was all about creating an amazing brand, distributing out our products through many different partners. Think partner-led growth. Like many different partners, retail stores, getting Nike in the places where Nike customers and future customers, consumers are. Then they said, though, a few years ago, hey, you know what? This whole thing that SaaS businesses are doing, this idea of like targeting people with digital ads and doing a lot more digital native things to increase their sales and focus a bit more on their existing customers versus acquiring new customers. Let's just do that. Guess what? Complete failure. So the lesson number one, Nick, is don't listen to SaaS marketers.
Fantastic movie about Nike, though. I didn't even know that was out. I watched it a couple months ago. Really good movie to learn about their whole thing. But yeah, this is a big failure.
Well, yeah, I mean, that movie was about like when they got started, right? Yeah. That was the Jordan era, right? Great movie, right? It was like, what was it called? Like Air, I think.
It was like, I forget the name of it, but yeah, it was like, it was all about the early days.
So the former CMO of Nike, this guy who I was talking about, right? Like, because he's no longer the CMO, he got fired. He's like, hey, let's focus on existing customers. But the flaw in that is you won't grow, right? Like there's only so much growth that can come from your existing customers. So number one, like if you're only, focused on your existing customers, that's going to be an issue. And the other thing is you're not going to create any net new penetration or market share if you focus too much on your existing customers. So, when you think about ideal customer profile, you have to think of it in the lens of, look, we have customers today. How many fit within this ICP and how has the ICP changed? And how do we acquire more customers like them? And in Nike's case, they over-indexed on this idea of digital marketing. E-com, basically. Like, hey, let's do everything ourselves. Let's create this e-com channel. And they invested a lot in this idea of Nike membership, which I think is a good move. They just over-indexed. So if you go to Nike and you find their membership experience, I'm sure a lot of folks listening have checked it out. Hey, that's good, but they destroyed the brand equity. Like what made Nike so amazing was the storytelling, was how they showed their brand in the marketplace through the eyes of athletes that then made other people aspire to be better, right? It's like, you think about like a community, you think about a brand, the altruistic nature of it and the idea of, hey, I'm not that person, but I aspire to be number one in my sport. I aspire to be the winner. I aspire to be the best at whatever I'm doing. I mean, that's Nike, right? And without that storytelling, without that inspiration, that motivation that comes through TV commercials, that comes through different activations they do at events and other things, you're going to lose a lot of mind share. And what they've done instead, and they're changing it now, but they created a lot of low quality, shitty content on the internet to try to drive people back to buy on their e-com site, which, I mean, in hindsight, it's like, yeah, why would you change what's been working for so long that makes Nike Nike? But in hindsight, like, hey, this is the hot new thing. Like, go do this thing. So I think that's the big lesson in story number one is like, you know, be true to yourself and be very careful about chasing something that might be working for another type of company, another group of companies, and you forget what makes you, you.
I've thought about this a little bit. I don't know. Again, Nike's such an established brand that I feel like they still have the brand equity where it's like, regardless, I mean, yeah, it's, you think of like, all right, cool. What are one of the, like the coolest brands as far as sneakers out there? Like Nike, like it's, you're not even going to question it. Like a lot of people would never like see this, and maybe it's for the younger generations, but I feel like even younger generations, like my daughter, she's 6, and like she, for Christmas, she was just like, I want a pair of Nike shoes. And I was like, do you even know what Nike shoes are? She's like, no, but all the kids have them at school. And I was just like, so like wearing a pair of Nike shoes, does that make you any better as like an athlete or whatever? She's just like, no, but like everyone just like has them. Like, it's just, you know what it is. Like, and it just, this story made me think about that. Like, even knowing what they're trying to do and the mistake that they made, like, I think they can still come back from it because it's just, it's an iconic brand that just everyone will always know.
Yeah, agreed. I think what they did really wrong though is they pulled Nike out of these stores. So like, hey, yeah, your daughter wants a Nike pair of shoes and you go to the store, you can't find Nikes anymore. Like that's what they did. Like you have to go e-com. It's like, oh, I can't touch the shoe. I have to like buy through I think that's a massive mistake. And they see their numbers. I'm trying to find the exact number of how much money they lost, like billions of dollars. Their stock price took a huge haircut. But yeah, I mean, it was really bad. They blew up their entire supply chain basically. Right? Like they had all of these partnerships through their distribution channels and they just said, hey, no, we're going to pivot to like e-com, like direct to consumer. And yes, you could do some of that, but I really think that the over pivot of not having the serendipitous moment of someone coming into a store saying, yeah, I know Nike to your point, and I'm going to buy that thing there now really hurt them.
Yeah, for sure. Before we dive into this conversation with Manoj, and honestly, I'm excited for that, I want to talk, I came across this on LinkedIn, and I mean, I know you spent lots of years at HubSpot, but they had something that I feel like has been coming, it's more apparent in our space right now. And they came out with this it's called the HubSpot AI Search Creator. And for those that aren't familiar, it helps brands see how visible they are in AI-powered search engines. It actually gives actionable recommendations, how you can improve, boost your brand awareness. I've tried this for TAC just to kind of see like what it came back with. But it also, reminds me similar of like, the website grader that they had. I feel like they're always doing all these like cool things. Now, I think there's some interesting things, some great things about this tool from a marketing perspective, and tying it back to ICP. Like, it's super accessible for marketers. Even if you don't have a technical background, it offers you custom recommendations to help kind of figure out where your AI usage in search makes sense. But it's important to remember that it's just one piece of the puzzle. So as marketers, lots of times, unfortunately, bandwidth and just layoffs and all that, it's one person taking on like 5 roles. And someone might not have a background in this and understanding, hey, here's how my ICP fits in, here's how my brand fits into everything else, but like they're just trying to make it work. I think that the insights somewhat can become surface level. There's a risk, and I know we've talked about this before, of leaning too heavily on AI, possibly at the expense of other critical elements, which is really like your content quality or the overall user experience. And it really brings me to my key point. So when I think of like, AI tools, and specifically this AI tool, like an AI tool should be a tool in our toolkit, but not the entire solution. And so, while it can optimize our SEO strategies, bringing it back to people first, nothing can replace that human creativity and the deep understanding of our audience, actually talking to people, seeing how your brand resonates in the market. And so I think ultimately our goal is to serve the end user, whatever the end user is to you. So when you're using tools like this, and again, nothing against HubSpot, like I'm sure thousands, hundreds of thousands of people are using this tool. And, obviously, I'm sure it's going to be incredibly successful, just like every other tool that they have. But you have to remember to balance those insights that you get with the human judgment and keep your focus on the people first when it comes to your marketing, and understanding that this plays into a small part of your tool set, but it's not the entire thing. And take it with a grain of salt as well. I mean, I don't think AI is perfect by any means. And, ask me that in 5 years, I might have a different answer. But I don't think people could just take these recommendations and just run with them, because, what's the difference of you asking an AI to figure out how your brand is in search than you going to ask other people? Like, you gotta still do the legwork to be able to pull everything together.
Well, humans aren't perfect, right? Like, so nothing's perfect.
Right. So there's always going to be critical errors, and it's like, how do you balance that to make it work?
That's the hardest thing. One of the hardest things, right? So let me ask you this: like, AI Search Grader, like, how good and actionable are the recommendations in that thing? I haven't used it.
Yeah. So when I put TAC in there, we got I think it was like a 65.
But how good are the recommendations? Let's really rip into it. Like, is it like, hey, these are 10 out of 10 recommendations, actionable, understanding specific, or is it like, not so much?
I feel like some of them are actionable, where it's like, hey, you need to focus on like long tail keywords, and like they gave recommendations based on like what those keywords are, based on like what TAC kind of like comes with. And I'm sure, I don't know if this changes company to company or what the recommendations they give. I'm sure they have something that spits that out, but I feel like some of them were like surface level, where I might not know the technical background of it, but like I know enough that like, oh, like I could have just said something like this, but like this doesn't get me to talking about it deeper, going to a deeper level. And maybe that's where their upsell opportunity is, where it's like they'll talk to the, kind of like their website grader, like they'll have you talk to someone to figure out how to maximize your website. And maybe it's just something where they're going to figure out how that all plays in. But some of them were actionable. I would say out of like the 10 recommendations that it gave, I would say probably 50% were actionable, 50% were high level.
Okay. So what do you think? What would you give a grade of it? F, D, C, B, A. What's the grade?
Again, not knowing a ton from like an SEO or like...
Stop qualifying. No. Just what's the grade? What's the grade?
I would probably say like a B minus C plus right now.
Okay, that's not too bad.
Early. This thing just came out, so I'm sure just like anything, they're going to make changes, tweaks to it, and they're going to take hopefully user feedback and improve it. But in present state, B minus, C plus. I think the recommendations can be a lot better, but I think there is going to be a lot of people that use it.
You're the ideal customer for this, though, right? Because you don't know a lot about SEO.
You're right. Yeah.
That tells you almost everything you need to know, right? So if it's not too helpful for you,
right?
I mean, it's not going to be helpful for someone who knows SEO then, probably.
Yeah, right. For people that know SEO, this is probably not going to be a great tool for you. Now, what I thought was interesting is like I filled out my information, filled out all my contact details to get, to the grader. But like no one contacted me. And I don't know, maybe that's just part of it. Maybe they're just collecting data at this point. But I thought someone would be able to like follow up on my score. Like, hey, here's the things that you could do to do even better, especially because our website is built on HubSpot. So like if this all plays in together and becomes one big ecosystem, like, I don't know. I just think that you could do so much more. But again, I don't know what their plan is or how early this is or like where they see this going in 6 months. But present day, B minus, C plus.
So it's C plus. So pretty average. Pretty average. Maybe slightly above average. Okay. Interesting. Yeah, AI Search Grader. I mean, they've done a ton of it with graders. We built a website grader, like you said, email grader. They have graders all like built into their product. We had a social media grader at one point when Twitter had open APIs. Twitter grader. Yeah, I mean, they're on a trend. They're hopping on a trend, right? They're trying to be first to market with this thing that, and it's interesting how they call them AI powered search engines. I don't know if I would call ChatGPT an AI powered search engine. I mean, maybe that's the new category. I haven't really heard about that, like in that context. It's good that they built something to help people understand or try to understand something that's very nascent and new and is going to change a lot. It's going to, it's going to change a dramatic amount. So we'll see. We shall see. And we'll see what Manoj says now about this ICP, ideal customer profile development, because at the end of the day, if you don't know who you're trying to sell to and why they would want to buy your product and how they should go about buying your product, all of this other stuff really doesn't matter too much. So my tip for you today is spend more time talking to your customers, less time doing other things. If you're not talking to your customers, at least 3 times a week, if you're an executive, I think you're missing a massive opportunity to improve your business. And Manoj will talk more about that. So let's get to the conversation, Nick.
Excited. See you all on the flip side.
All right, everyone. On to the featured guest today, Manoj from SalesIntel. Manoj, what's going on, my friend?
No, a lot. Summer is almost coming to end. Everybody's getting ready for the prime season, right? In the B2B world, as you know, our prime season has kind of 2 phases. September 5th, after Labor Day, all the way to the midnight, past midnight, December 31st, right? I remember for the last couple of years, we're still signing deals at 2 a.m. because it's not yet midnight in California. So that's the first wave. And the second is January through March. And many people ask me why. I say, well, the reason September to December is our prime season is because we all spend way too much time on the beaches, right? So the chances are we're not going to hit our Q3 and we got to make up for the Q4. And some of us prepare early on, right, for the next year. So that's why, that's the season. That's our buying time.
Yeah, it is. And some people have shifted it to the 1 month away from the calendar, right? And, it takes a little pressure off. But nonetheless, we are going into the closing stretch, Nick and Manoj. Closing stretch. So, Manoj, you've been the CEO of SalesIntel for how long now?
6 years, almost.
Wow. Congrats. That's a pretty good run. And you've built a really successful business. And the topic we want to really hone in on with you today is something that every business has to always be thinking about and measuring and understanding, because it's a fluid situation. And that is your ideal customer profile, aka who did you build this product for and why, and how the hell are you going to sell it to them?
Yep. I met many companies don't get it right. As basic as it sounds, ideal customer profile, they don't dial it in. And companies that invest enough time in defining their ICP, being data-driven, they see the magic. They see the rewards that come on the other side, in terms of all the key KPIs of SaaS that we measure, right?
So how do you make sure you don't get it wrong?
Yeah, well, it shows right in your funnel, right? You don't have enough pipeline. Your deals are not converting as fast, and your ACV is not going in the right direction. And painfully, it also shows up in your renewal. Because churn is so high, right? You're able to sell to the customer, but they were just not the good fit, the perfect fit for your solution or your services. And as a result of that, customers are going to churn. And in SaaS business, in the time that we are living in, your NRR is a lot more of an important KPIs than your growth at the top, right?
Yeah. So is it only looking at the metrics?
I think it's going to show up in the KPIs, and the customer satisfaction is going to show up in your morale of your go-to-market team. It's going to show up, for the entire business. Imagine being a product person developing product for someone, and your sales people, your go-to-market team is having a hell of a time to bring, a customer on, or the customers that they bring in, they lose. So you're going to see everywhere, whether it's the hard KPIs that we all measure in the SaaS world, as well as in your day-to-day company morale.
Nick, before we get to your question, I want to do an audible, put Manoj on the spot a bit. Who then is the responsible individual to make sure the ICP is right and stays right?
Yeah. It's go-to-market is a team effort. Ultimately, I think the CEO owns it, and CEO owns the go-to-market strategy. She works very closely with, the company's top lieutenants, which is your, CMO, if you have one, your CRO, right? Your head of customer success and account management and product, right? You come together under the leadership of the CEO to define who your ICP is. In the earlier days, it depends upon the size of the company and the maturity curve of where the company is. If you're a startup, 2 founders and 2 developers, then it's the founder's instinct to say, you know what, I had this problem, or I worked at the previous company, we solved this problem, let's go after this, right? And then as a company grows and becomes more mature, you have some data points, right? And we recommend to our customers and prospects that, once you have enough data points, then be data driven, because your data is telling you something, right? Which cohort of your data has, do you have a better win rate, or when you win, you're retaining them. So the data tells you a lot about who you should go after.
I like that a lot. It's interesting. I was doing customer marketing for a while, and I was at a company, and I feel like, going back to the ICP, I feel like it was partly wrong. And I think it's partly because we pivoted what the ICP was. And one of the things that I noticed was that time to value, as far as a customer, and I guess it plays into NRR as well, but like time to value, if you think about it, in a SaaS business, say you're signing a 12-month contract and you're not seeing time to value for up to 90 days, that's really only giving you, a short period to see if the product's worth your value. And so one of the things that I worked on that ultimately helped retool our ICP was getting that time to value to sub 30 days for the right people. And once we kind of flushed out ultimately there's going to be churn from bad accounts and just wrong ICP fit. But I noticed it made a huge difference once we were all aligned on the ICP. So
yeah, couldn't agree more with you. Time to value in certain SaaS organization, it'd be great if every organization could have 30 days. Like, we have sub 30 days because our product is very, very simple. Like, the likelihood the customer has never used our product is very, very low. So they're familiar with the space, the problem that we solve. But there are some products where the implementation is 90 days, right? We are currently implementing a finance and accounting software, and it's been past 90 days and we are not up and running yet, right? So the time to value, is probably going to be 4, 5, 6 months in certain cases.
Great point. Let's talk about CEOs though. Yourself, I know a lot of CEOs. What is the biggest mistake being made by CEOs in 2024?
Oh boy. You know what? We as CEOs, we make a lot of mistakes. The key is to not make the same mistake again. And then second is to not make the mistake that somebody else has made it. Learn from someone else's mistake. And I see even now, obvious mistakes that you see that are visible are spray and pray. You're still seeing, all right, let's just, grow up. The second they grow at all cost, they're still hiring all those BDRs, even though they're not productive, just because they raised $80 million just before, the market crashed and they have money in the bank. The third is not cutting costs fast enough, right? I have been victim of that mistake myself. Like I always think, I wish I had terminated that contract fast enough, or I wish I had shut down that AWS services. I wish, I had saved cost, because when you're running businesses that are coming up, regardless of whether you're venture backed or not, money is oxygen, right? It's like a video game. You run out of coin, you die, you start all over again. So I see still some of the CEOs not cutting costs fast enough.
I want a more spicy answer, Manoj. Those are good. They got better as you said them. Okay, I give you that. I'm not taking it though. I think there's bigger mistakes people are making. I mean, look, like I technically, like Nick and I have a very small business, 2 people, plus we have a team of people that work with us. And I'm technically the one to make a lot of the important decisions with a lot of input from Nick and whatnot. But I want to hear from you first, and I'll give my answer.
Yeah. So on the go-to-market, let's just talk specifically about where we help our customers. I talked to 100 go-to-market leaders in the last since January, or 3rd or 4th, in the first 7 months, and as part of it, I gave them 100 pennies as part of this 20-minute webinar. I was like, here's 100 pennies. Your goal is to build the most optimal pipeline for your business, right? That converts into revenue, and the revenue that you can keep, that continues to stay with you and impacts your positive NRR. And it was surprising how many go-to-market leaders, not specifically CEOs, but how many go-to-market leaders had still sales-led motion, right? Whereas when you segment the data as to who are still focusing on sales-led versus different go-to-market strategies, and I'll come to the top 3 that came out. When you take the CEO as a title out and then look at the rest of the go-to-market professionals, the top 3 go-to-market strategies that these professionals were spending their 100 pennies on were partnership, communities, and events.
You think the mistake is they're not taking the right go-to-market approach? Or they don't understand?
It's not. They're not getting them spend fast enough. They're not taking data-driven approaches. Some of them are very, very smart. They especially the second-time CEOs, they've learned from the mistakes. They have seen their company go under. They have seen investors firing them. So, bad things have happened to them. And then the second time around, they are very quick to respond to the economic changes. They're very quick to respond to the market signals, when it comes to, go-to-market strategy and pivoting it.
Fair. I'll give you my answer, then we'll go to the next question, getting back to ICP. The biggest mistake, and Nick, you can just roast me on this if you want, is CEOs do not spend enough time and money, investments, in improving the company culture, in making their team better, happier, and more productive. That's the biggest mistake. And that is affecting everything when it comes to a company.
Yep. Look, this is my 4th one. I kind of take it for granted. And I learned, my first company, culture wasn't a thing. Second company, after 2-3 years, this company, when we started, the very first thing was, focus on the culture and define your company culture that everybody can remember. Just keep it very simple and harp on that, right? When we build our 2024, every year we build our, focus areas. At the very top of the slide is culture and brand, right? Without a strong culture, you cannot build a good company, a successful company. And without a good brand, you can't build a business, right? So that's the number 1 focus area. And then your operational and then the strategic, initiatives that will take a couple of years to steer the ship. But that to me is foundational.
Yeah.
I was going to say, yeah, I agree. And I mean, to be honest with you, going back to culture, like I've turned down jobs that had higher pay, but I could tell the culture wasn't there. And I mean, you can get red flags and you can get senses. Does the CEO actually get marketing? Like, how is this all going to play together? In my experience, I've worked for Mark before at our last company together. And like, yeah, I mean, I agree. I think culture plays a huge part of it. But I mean, I've also worked for companies where the culture has been terrible. And it's like every single day you're wondering why you're still there. I feel like culture then kind of cascades or waterfalls down into lots of other issues because the culture isn't set at the top.
Some of your work, Mark, I know you worked at HubSpot. And if you look at when HubSpot started, it wasn't that they innovated the marketing automation, right? And it wasn't that HubSpot had the best product possible, but where they won was, and kudos to Dharmesh, he kind of took the ownership, which is unusual for a CTO to take the ownership. He's a founder, co-founder, CTO. He took the ownership of the culture and just kept investing in this to the point where today it's like a Bible. Lots of companies, like me included, I'm a fan of Dharmesh. Companies just use that as a framework to build their culture framework.
Well, this goes into then, I think culture goes to brand and brand goes to ICP. Like it's all kind of together, right? When you think about it. So I think of CEOs as the CMO, by the way. People say, no, the CMO of a company is the CEO. That's my opinion. And I like your answer with the CEO owning the ICP. So from a CEO's perspective, what's some big misconceptions in your mind as you create an ICP or as you update your ICP? Like, what are you thinking when it comes to that ICP development?
The biggest misconceptions for most CEOs, I'd say, early stage to even mid-stage companies is, I know who our ICP is, right? It's more of a gut feel than actually being data-driven and have the proof. And when you're a smaller company, your people are not gonna, they just go along with you. They're not gonna push back, unless you have a really strong leadership team and really strong go-to-market team that pushes you back and say, yes, Mr. CEO, I understand that's your gut feeling, but where's the data?
I love that. No, I love that. So let's unpack the next one. And Nick, people first, Nick and I talk a lot about this. So tee up Manoj for this next one, because I actually am going to be very interested to see how you take this next question, at least where you take it.
Yeah. So when you think about, people first and putting people at the center of every interaction and experience, how does that look from an ICP perspective? Like when you think about your ICP, when you think about what really matters, are you putting people at the core of it, or how does that come across in your mind?
Yeah. So, at the end of the day, I'm sure you heard, people buy from people. Businesses, LLC, anybody can go, register an LLC online, $70, $75. It doesn't mean anything. People make the company, and, business is all people. Business is team. Nice, I say, building business is a team sport. And in the transactions, which we all are in the business, people buy from people. So everything that you do, you keep the person in mind, right? When you define the ICP, many times, even the mature go-to-market leaders, they make a mistake and they intertwine the companies that you're targeting. In my mind, that there's a very clear distinction between the companies that you're targeting, I call that the ICP, and then the buying center within that company that you are targeting to buy your solution. And now, as we know, the buying center is not just, one person, it's a committee of people. Depending upon the study that you look at, there's 7.4 person on an average involved to 11.2, right? The Gartner says 7.4, CEB. Prior to them merging, they came up with a whole study of 11.2 decision makers involved in a B2B software purchase. So I kind of like to separate these two things. I think your first and foremost definition of ICP is 1A, based on the characteristics, based on the data, such as firmographic data, technographic data, your locations, your size of the business, and so on and so forth. Who are the companies that will buy your software or service and get the value out of, right? And why those elements are important? A size of a company may be perfect. Let's say you're selling to companies that are 50 to 200. But when you further deep down say, how big is their, let's say you're selling to finance department or you're selling to sales department. How big is the sales department? Aha, all of a sudden, if it's a BD driven organization, guess what? They may have 0 salesperson and your tool is for sales organization. Well, there's not a fit here. So the more data points you have about the company, firmographic, the better, i.e. in this particular example, at department size. And then second thing is the technology stack, because companies buy product that are easily implemented and they kind of work well with their existing tech stack, have the integrations already available. That's why the technographic component is super important to have. Once you nail that, then depending upon your product and the target market size or TAM, I think you need to put the intent layer. Depending on who you talk to, some people are, they're a big fan of intent. Others are like, intent doesn't work. I think when you set the right expectation as to what intent is, it's directionally giving you some indication that these are the companies that you should talk to, right? Because at any given point of time, 5% of your target market is in is in market, is looking for a solution. So refining your segment, that ICP segment, by putting an intent layer is good. So that to me is like 1B. And then 1C is your people. Okay, who within these companies are you targeting? Who is the buying center? Is it the CRO, CMO, RevOps? In our case, it's a RevOps, it's BDR leader, it's sales leader, it's marketing leader, right? Depending upon the composition of go-to-market team, we have a separate entry point into the organization. So that's how the long-winded answer to say, separate the companies. Once you figure out, everything else is people. Who are the people that you're targeting?
Love that.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's like talk to people. Like you can have all this data, but like if you're not talking to people to validate your ICP assumptions, like every week, like especially early on, like when you're really early, pre-product market fit, or if your product market fit is changing, like you need to have conversations with people. One of my favorite examples of a company doing this right now to build a really innovative product is Day.ai. They have assembled a army of people that are building the product with them. Nick and I are two of those people. And they're having conversations daily with these people in Slack and in Zoom to both build an audience that when they are ready to prime the pump and go to market, it's going to be like a massive success. And they're using that to really understand what their ICP should look like when they do start spending real dollars to acquire customers. So we're going to have Mike Peachy on a future GTM News Desk. He's going to unpack his whole playbook, but I think that to me is one of like the best ways to do it. And then once you get to scale, everything you said, Manoj, makes a ton of sense. I think there's just different approaches based off of stage of company.
Stage of company, absolutely. When you're trying to figure out your product market fit, then your communication with your ICP, defines who your ICP is, right? And the more the frequent, I always tell people when defining the ICP, should you do it or not? How should you do it? How often should you do it? Should you do it or not? Well, you will pay the price if you don't, and just go with your CEO's gut feeling. How should you do it? Make it data driven. Get data from someone that gives you intelligence about, yes, you know what, I'm getting this, and then bounce your close won and close lost. Many times people say, oh, here it is that you're winning. Let's just go find lookalike, and then that's how our ICP is. Well, that is one part of it. How about the close lost, right? Do you want to bring the customers that look good, but then they churn on the other side, right? So that, and then how frequently, I think the frequency of defining your ICP depends upon the maturity curve. So in this example, Day.ai, they are daily because they're trying to figure out their ICP. For a company that is, call it $5 to $20 million in ARR, I think twice a year, because it takes few months for you to, once you're defined the ICP, for you to see the fruits of your labor, right? Regardless of the go-to-market channel that you adopt, whether sales-driven marketing, partnership, event, the community-driven, it's going to take you 6 months to figure out, okay, you know what? I dialed that in. Let me see if I'm getting the results on the other side or not in terms of my pipeline, the daily velocity, the ACV increment, and sales cycle getting, shorter. And if you get those, that's great. If you don't, then you need to tweak it,
Yep. Before we go any deeper, let's pause here. The rest of the conversation, you folks can find it on the TAC network. Manoj is going to share some secrets, some frameworks to doing this in an even more specific way. Thank you, Manoj, for the conversation today.
So my pleasure.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of GTM News Desk, presented by the TAC network. To hear our full conversation with our guest today, head to the link in the show notes to subscribe to the TAC network. Until next time, I'm Mark Killens.
And I'm Nick Bennett. Keep it people first, everybody.